Today, we're going to fully break down and dissect the behaviors of Patsy and John Ramsey when they were on Larry King for an interview where there was an ex-detective talking to him, and he's under the impression they're guilty. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Yeah, this video is from an interview on Larry King, as you said, with Stephen Thomas, who is the guy who says that Patsy murdered JonBenét. This is a really interesting. There's a lot of animation back and forth. This is 3 years after JonBenét was murdered.
And your lawyer said that you didn't want the FBI to do it. Why?
We didn't necessarily not want the FBI to do it. We wanted someone who was fair and independent.
Do you think the FBI would have been partial, Patsy? I mean, do you think the FBI cares?
I'm not saying that. I'm not accusing that at all. Just that was, not the definition of independent.
You think they come with a degree of opinion?
I don't know, but we eliminated that possibility by insisting they be independent. We went to the best polygrapher in the country, had the results quality controlled by the person who invented the polygraph system.
And he was going to release those results no matter what, right?
Absolutely.
That was a given understanding that it would be made public no matter what he found.
The condition we agreed to.
Steve, did that appeal to you?
Well, it certainly didn't satisfy the Boulder Police Department. They are putting little stock in this polygraph, and quite frankly, it took Patsy, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think I am, 3 tries to pass a polygraph. We had an inconclusive test, a second test that showed distortion, and finally, a third test with another examiner. She passed truthfully.
Was that examiner respected?
Certainly nobody's testing or challenging the credentials of the examiner, but again, it's not the government authorities who want to conduct that polygraph.
Let's go back a bit. You have not been together since when? When was the last time?
April 3, 1997.
When you were still on the case?
Right.
Did you question them at that time? You both remember that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you were taken off the case?
I resigned from the Boulder Police Department in the summer of 1998.
Because of this case?
Absolutely.
And you resigned because?
Because I felt that Patsy is involved in this death, in this tragedy, and I felt it had become such a debacle and was going nowhere. Out of frustration, I left the case in police work.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, listen, although we kind of advertised this as a breakdown of the Ramseys, what interests me most here is this ex-detective here, Steve, I think his name is. Really interesting what's going on here. And quite frankly, I'll say this from moment one, probably one of the most annoying interviews from his behavior in it that I've come across in a long, long time. Okay, so Larry King talking about the lie detector testing. And he says, Steve, did that appeal to you? Steve, did that appeal to you? And Steve here completely displaces the answer onto Boulder PD, which is a very political way of dealing with this. He swerves past it, puts it onto Boulder PD, and really doesn't answer the question. And that's something we ask for all the time. Did somebody answer the question here? I'm not saying that Steve is being deceptive in any way here, but he's certainly being political, and he's certainly not answering a clear, evaluative question. What did you think to that, Steve? What were your thoughts on that? So he won't give his evaluation on this, but he does lurch forward with both of his shoulders on this one, and kind of barges in his answer there. And we're going to see this kind of very animated, big behavior from him all the way through. There's a lot of side of the mouth turning up in what we'd often think is contempt and disdain. Happens on, quite frankly, it took Patsy a number of times. There was distortion, another examiner, Patsy's involved. So contempt, disdain showing there. But it's happening so often in this part of the interview and other parts of the interview that contempt and disdain is pretty much a baseline for him. So look, I would say it's almost baseline his contempt and disdain for this whole thing at the moment. Really odd way to start on this kind of barge gesture, this swerving a simple question. Don't like what I'm seeing already. Chase, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I think her willingness to take the polygraph test was used by a lot of people to suggest that she had nothing to hide. And other people are arguing that
passing or failing a polygraph proves nothing. In Patsy's case, it became a tool for public opinion a lot more than it was for truth. And I think it showed how these tests fail to deliver accurately, and they can be easily weaponized in an emotional situation. And I guarantee you they can be swung whatever way they need to be swung. But Patsy's experience with the polygraph is a good example of why these tests should not carry so much weight. They don't detect lies. They measure stress, and in high-stakes case, people are stressed. So it's a reminder that justice needs better tools than a machine that reads emotions instead of truth. So most of the time, it's the experience level of the examiner that determines reliability and not the machine. And sometimes the machine can be turned off and that an experienced examiner still produces better results. So coupled with this, there's how it's used. It should never be used to detect deception alone. It should be used to direct human attention. That's the job of a polygraph, to direct human attention, not to pronounce truth or false. And this is when you hear us say so often stuff like, this is where I would be asking more questions. You hear Greg say, that point right there is a red flag. I'm going to dig on that. And things might have a high likelihood of deception, but that's based on factors like context, clusters, culture, and experience, which cannot be measured by a machine. Well, yet. Anyway.
My wife is a private investigator, and I asked her, how do you find out so much information about these people you're looking into? And she said, the internet, Google. And that's because data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who wants to target you. Your full name, your email address, your home address, your health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. I don't have to do anything. So I used Aura to find out how many of these data brokers are selling my information. I couldn't believe it. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it helps protect me from hackers who could use that information to help them get access to my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't even see. With Aura, I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download a bunch of apps. It's really easy to use, especially for somebody like me who's not a technical person, and I get everything for one affordable price. You may have one or two of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door but leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work keeping me safe so I can focus on other things and not have to worry about all that kind of stuff. I value my privacy, and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/TBP to start your free 2-week trial. That's aura.com/TBP, and there's a link for that in the description below.
Greg, what do you got?
I have a good friend named Rodney Smith, and he is a polygrapher, and he will tell you that it's really easy to make big mistakes with a polygraph. There's a tool, exactly what you said. Good polygrapher is a good interrogator with a tool, with a prop. I say that all the time. A bad polygrapher is just useless. So you can take it with that. There's a couple of interesting things. By the way, I think it's on the Crime Junkie podcast. She did a great hour-long interview with John Ramsey. I think that's where I heard him say he wished he'd never done this interview because it was so crazy the way everything went. So this is a good interview for us to look at lots of deviation from what's normal in culture. And let's talk for a minute, Mark. I think you're dead on with a handful of these things, like him lurching forward, coming at them. Culturally, that is just all kinds of awkward. No one does that. And now let's go back and think about maybe why they're treating the FBI differently than we would today. I think the FBI was much more respected in 1996 than it is today with all the political things going on in the world. So we'll see some of their dancing around, well, we chose to go another place for another reason when John does that. So let's talk about that a bit. There's also a part of him, I think that lunging forward is this guy came here for a fight and Patsy came here ready. So I'll show you really good body language to indicate that. Couple of things. when we talk about the FBI and you hear John avoid the FBI, avoid calling them out and saying, well, they may be biased, I think that's because culturally that would not have been very well received in 96. Today, a lot of people would go, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. I'll get my own guy if I can afford it. The other thing is, if you lose a child, you feel guilt. It doesn't matter how it happened or what happened. If you lose a child, you're going to feel a tremendous amount of guilt, and anything at your disposal you're going to try to do to fix whatever that is. And that's just a wiring issue, because it's the most important relationship you have in your entire life. You can get rid of your wife, you can get rid of your husband, but your children are your children. Very different thing. So them wanting to spend every penny they have to clear this up is a natural response. If they don't think the Boulder police are up to the job, it's smart for them to go and say, I want somebody else. And we'll hear in a few minutes about lawyers and that kind of thing. But just as John starts to talk about the FBI, watch him, he leaks some stress. His shoulders start to bounce a little bit. He's flapping his wings a little. His hands grab the mic. His cadence shifts as he avoids saying, well, the FBI might not be. He says, I don't know, but I wanted to eliminate. You can hear that cadence. That slows down. He got the best in the country. They got the guy who invented the polygraph. That's probably a pretty smart move if you've got money to be able to go to that other person. And then you see Patsy when she says she is definitive of, when she says it's definitive of independence, she shows her lower teeth, she eye blocks, and her chin goes up. That's defiance. If you can't see all that, it's very tough to realize where she's going. And then she comes out fighting, and she exposes those lower teeth, and she starts to rock just a little bit. She came here for that fight, and if you pay attention to her, right after she says all that, her blink rate goes through the roof, her respiration comes up, and I think that's a reflection of being ready. We talk about fight or flight. Flight is trying to get away from something, but fight is going at something. She's headed headlong at this guy. And this is a very different Patsy than we saw, very tranquilized the day after or 3 days after her child was dead. We said then she was on some kind of tranquilizer, and she looked very calm. We expect her to be very adamant. She's pretty adamant in this one. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree with you. Now, let's go back to the lie detector just for a second. If you ever get in trouble with something, what's it called? Polygraph test. Everybody knows there's a lie detector, though. That's what they call it. That's why I always say that.
I know, but I just wanted to make sure that
Okay.
be clear.
Okay, so if we're going to go highbrow, that's where I'll go then. So on a polygraph test, what you need is the person who, if you ever get in trouble and something happens, you have to take one of those. Then what you want to say is this. When they say, will you take they're going to say lie detector test. They're not going to say polygraph. And you'll say, yeah, I'll take one. However, my caveat is get me the person who's been doing it the longest. And out of those people that have done it the longest, the oldest one. I want the person who's been around the longest you possibly can, that has been here, that has been doing this. That's the person I want, because that person is going to give you the best outcome if you're being honest, because that's where the key is in the person giving the test. So that's what I would suggest on that if you ever find yourself in that situation. Now, let's talk about the body language of the Ramseys and of this ex-detective. Let's compare those and look at how different they are. Now, the ex-detective, he's got this bounce thing going on when he's talking all the time. He hits the words he thinks are important and he bounces. That's what you see in people who are giving the news. They're out in the wild, and they say, go do this car wreck or a building on fire or something. And when they talk, they go, thanks for being here, and do all that. That looks to me like that's what he's doing. So maybe he was one of the guys that was doing TV all the time for them, because he's popping up quite a lot. His body language is really stiff. So are the things he's saying. Everything is really compact and really these planned, almost sound bites he's saying for some of this stuff. And it's real tight and it's not real wordy. It's just right there to the point. And along with this stiff body language, there are no emotions in his face. Nothing changes. He's always got this going down or the eyebrows go up. That's about all we see besides those things Mark was talking about in his face, where the contempt, the fake contempt thing or contempt thing's going up on him. So then you look at the Ramseys. Theirs is very smooth, and they're up and they're being defiant, and they're coming on strong because they feel like they've been wronged. And that's what it looks like when you're telling the truth. That's what you're looking for. When you're looking for somebody being honest, that's what it looks like. The other guy is on the attack, and they're just trying to tell what happened. And that's what's happening. Now, their stories are similar when they are talking about the same things, Patsy and John. but they're not the very same. They don't use the same words. They don't use the same amount of words. They don't use the same delivery, anything like that, because they're on the same page. When you arrest two people and there's been a bank robbery and you want to find out if they're together, you don't let them sit together and talk beforehand, because when they do, they'll come in with the same story, very same story, and they'll use the same words. It'll be in the same order. The structure will be the same, even if they're not put together. If they planned ahead of time, that's what'll happen. That's not what we're seeing here. They didn't sit down and say, okay, I'll say this and we'll say this. Nope, that's not what happened. We're seeing the honest reaction to these questions and this aggressiveness to them from this ex-detective. So I don't see any deception on them in here whatsoever so far. Nothing. Zilch. All right, we good?
And your lawyer said that you didn't want the FBI to do it. Why?
We didn't necessarily not want the FBI to do it. We wanted someone who was fair and independent.
Do you think the FBI would have been partial, Patsy? I mean, do you think the FBI cares?
I'm not saying that. I'm not accusing that at all. Just that was, not the definition of independent.
You think they come with a degree of opinion?
I don't know, but we eliminated that possibility by insisting they be independent. We went to the best polygrapher in the country, had the results quality controlled by the person who invented the polygraph system.
And he was going to release those results no matter what, right?
Absolutely.
That was a given understanding that it would be made public no matter what he's on.
The condition we agreed to.
Steve, did that appeal to you?
Well, it certainly didn't satisfy the Boulder Police Department. They are putting little stock in this polygraph, and quite frankly, it took Patsy, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't think I am, 3 tries to pass a polygraph. We had an inconclusive test, a second test that showed distortion, and finally a third test with another examiner. She passed truthfully.
Was that examiner respected?
Certainly nobody's testing or challenging the credentials of the examiner, but again, it's not the government authorities who want to conduct that polygraph.
Let's go back a bit. You have not been together since when? When was the last time?
April 3, 1997.
When you were still on the case?
Right.
Did you question them at that time? You both remember that?
Absolutely.
Okay. And you were taken off the case?
I resigned from the Boulder Police Department in the summer of 1998.
Because of this case?
Absolutely.
And you resigned because?
Because I felt that Patsy is involved in this death, in this tragedy, and I felt it had become such a debacle and was going nowhere. Out of frustration, I left the case in police work.
Your contention is she wrote the note.
I do.
You base that on?
I do. I base that on question document examiners. By the time I left the Boulder Police Department, June of 1998, Patsy, out of 73 suspects whose handwriting had been looked at, you were the only one who showed evidence to suggest authorship.
Now, why then didn't they go right in and arrest? Why didn't they?
These people know better than anybody. Probable cause was not the issue in this case. Patsy, you could have been arrested in this case.
I wish I had been, and then we would have had a free and fair trial, and you would have met your Waterloo, Mr. Thomas.
Are you saying that you would have through the questions, John?
Question, Steve, while you was assaulted on my wife, because you have assaulted her, you've called her a murderer. You have checked 73 suspects and said because Patsy's handwriting was the only one that couldn't be eliminated, therefore she is a murderer. That is absurd. You would have to check
change your handwriting
billion people.
I did not change my handwriting.
Why would question document experts and people who looked at the ransom note suggest that you changed handwriting habits after the homicide?
We have not heard that. That is not what our experts said.
Can Patsy answer the question, Mr. Rouse?
If you're going to continue to assault her, I will continue to answer the
She
questions.
came on the show tonight. I'm assuming she's capable of answering questions.
She's very
here.
capable of answering your questions.
I still haven't heard the theory yet. I totally agree, but whoever wrote this ransom note killed our daughter. Yes, I concur wholeheartedly.
He believes you.
Let's hear. What I want to hear is, how is it exactly that you think that I killed my daughter?
What's the
I just cannot understand that. I want to hear it from start to finish.
Patsy,
Tell me.
I wasn't there.
exactly
You were at home that night, and apparently you say you can't say for
Mr.
certainty. You were in the house, right?
Yes.
Am I-
Answer my question, please.
Well, he wasn't there, so he can't know for
He
sure.
has a theory.
He has to have a theory. All right.
Murder.
Yeah, and
What
you,
is
and
your
you've
theory?
heard the theory. I
haven't heard the theory.
offered a hypothesis. One,
Please answer my question.
I'm trying.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
He is a bouncy dude. He's just, every point that he makes, he's accentuating by this like bouncing. I don't think I've seen that before. I've never, I don't think I've ever seen it this exaggerated. So it's really strange how the question, let's go into something unusual with Patsy here. It's strange how the question that she asked isn't about the letter. And there's an appearance here of her almost kind of jumping over and skipping that topic. And even John jumps in here, and instead of either of them making a denial, there's only a statement that they haven't heard the same thing as the police guy. I've heard something different. Even though they were involved, they've heard something different. I thought that was unusual. Her question is about precisely from start to finish, which I think is really weird. There's an insistence on the note being the key to who killed their daughter. They just insist that everything is tied into this note. So her voice volume reduces by about 80%, which we have fading facts here, when she's talking about not modifying her handwriting. You can hear her voice just calm down to a whisper. There's no, there's a continuous barrage of tell me how it went down, tell me what happened, etc. There's definitely an extreme confidence in her questioning his knowledge of the details of a crime. And there's a severe lack of confidence in all the details about the letter. That's what I see here. I see when that letter is mentioned, Patsy's confidence goes way down. You can see it in her body. You can hear it in her tone. And there's something about this letter that keeps coming to the surface. The more videos that we watch, and we've done other videos on this, and you guys have all sat down with John Ramsey before and interviewed him and talked to him in person. There's limitless confidence in making denials about the murder, and there's somehow some weird uncertainty about every aspect of the letter, specifically in all the videos that I have ever seen. And I'm no expert on the case. And many of you watching may know some detail. Maybe there's some detail that we missed since we don't know the case very well. Maybe there's something about that letter we don't know. That's why we're seeing this drop off of confidence about the letter and so much confidence about the denial for the homicide. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Yeah, I agree with you. And my initial theory on that was, if you remember from when you did these a while back, was that when they first discovered her, I think maybe they thought, and I don't know if I think this now, because after talking to him, I don't think this is what happened. But my theory was they thought that Burke did it. And then she's like, geez, we got to we'll write a ransom note. We've got to get him out of this so they don't lose 2 kids and that whole thing. So I think that was my original thought on that, theory on that. Could still have something to do with it where since they thought he was going to get in trouble, they would make it look like an outsider did it. But I think once they realized that it was an outsider that did it, if that's what happened, and that's what they believe, then they realized, oh shoot, we've already lied. We can't continue doing that. We got to stick with this and say it's part of the crime. So that's where I sit on that at this point. But this is the first time I've ever heard somebody say in a situation like this, I wish I would have been arrested. I wish I would have, because we would have found out all these, there would have been a real investigation. We would have found out all this stuff. Yeah. That takes nerve for somebody who doesn't have a history of crime at all, not even a little bit. So I thought that was fascinating that she said that. And that's not the way guilty people talk. They don't say things like that. I wish I had been arrested. No. And the look on her face and that anger, all that's real. She's upset. She's frustrated and angry with the way this thing is laid out so far. And she says, when she says, yes, I concur wholeheartedly, this is not the classic case, then what, or the way, not classically the way it's handled, we see her head go, I concur. People are going to think she's saying yes and she's saying no. That's not what's happening. Watch when her head hits, it hits almost with every word. So she's illustrating with her head. And that's one of the ways you do that. The difference in someone who's saying yes but saying no at the same time, there's a big difference in that, because they'll say yes, and their head will go back and forth just a little bit, and it'll keep going. Just a little bit. Paul Ekman did the first in-depth studies on that. So check out Paul Ekman, E-K-M-A-N. Then a good interrogator is not going to do, and detective, they're not going to do what this guy did. They're going to listen. They're going to be listening to the person who's talking to him, see what else they can gather from that. He's not doing that. When they start talking, he starts talking. He starts telling his part of it. Come to find out from Greg, this guy's written a book, and that's probably the reason he's on there, trying to sell his dang book. So that's why he's coming on so heavy, I would think. Now, keep in mind, and I want you, and I don't, hear me out on this. As a group, we four are body language experts, we're professionals, we're analysts, but at the same time, we are professional because of what we do. We know what they look like, and we know how to make somebody mad. We know how to make somebody mad. That's why this guy's getting on our nerves, because we see him doing this on purpose. Because in our situation, sometimes you have to make somebody mad, see what you can get out of them. But he's doing that on purpose. I've always said, and you guys know I've always said this, the thing I like about when people ask me, what's the greatest thing about body language interrogation that you like? And I always say, it's enabled me to be the I always knew I could be. And that's what this guy's doing, and that's why we recognize that. So as we go through here and say, oh, he's doing this, that's what he's doing. He's trying to make them mad because he thinks he's going to trip them up that way, which is one of the ways you train. What? Go ahead.
I think that's his natural personality.
You think so? Gosh, I wouldn't get along with this guy at all then.
Because I think that
I think it's even for. I'll tell you when my time comes out.
No, what do you got? Let's talk about it.
I think he's a true believer. I think he believes this is the case, and it's emphatic. He's doing all that stuff because he believes that she did this, whether there's foundation on it or not. And if you want to hear it, listen to him borrowing authority from people who have said X, Y, and Z. He wouldn't be bringing in all that evidence if he didn't believe this. You can believe and be wrong as all hell, but
yeah, I don't know. I think I see him being that. That's what I think. It's doing it on purpose.
I think both of us could be true. Okay?
It could both be true.
But I think he has the ability to know how to poke
button
people.
Push. Yeah.
I think you're right, Greg. He's attached himself wholeheartedly to a theory which is he can't prove in any way whatsoever. He's written a book about it, and he's got to sell it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
He's stuck now. He's stuck.
Yeah, yeah, and it shows. That's what this behavior he's showing. There's no room for that. This is completely unprofessional of him to be doing that. That's just not. This isn't the time or the place for that. So that's why it's getting me all worked up, because I think I see what he's doing, and it could be part of his personality. Probably is, because it seems so natural for him. But think of the ease we could do that. I think that's what he's doing. That's me. I don't know. I'm a Capricorn. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm a Cancer. Let's see what I've got. Cancer with Cancer rising. Cancer with Cancer rising. So, and in Chinese astrology, double steel dog. It doesn't get more extreme.
I wouldn't be playing it.
So here's what I've got for you on this. In the kind of conversations between the Steve, as I'm going to call him, I don't know what the guy does. Just call him Steve. Okay, Steve and Larry. I'm not even sure what Larry is doing here. But anyway, Steve and Larry are in this conversation. What do they come up with? Conjecture, based, probable, could have, I wish I had, theory, suggest, hypothesis. That's the word cloud around them. And then Patsy comes in and says something I think really important, and straight down the line, she says, I agree that whoever wrote this ransom note killed our daughter. You couldn't get any straighter than that. I agree that whoever wrote this ransom note killed our daughter. So, either...
Here's my question, though.
Yeah.
Why is the letter so weird and important when there's frickin' DNA? And you could just say whoever's DNA that is killed the daughter.
No, they do. They do. No, but
I see what you're saying, though. Why not open up with that?
Because so much weight has been put on this letter, and because the letter is a piece of mystery. And here's what I think goes wrong with the letter in people's critical thinking around it. What they do, what people's critical thinking on it, or crooked thinking on it, which is not to say it's illegal thinking. It's just crooked. It's not properly put together. It's not actually critical thinking. Is they go, this is the note of a terrorist kidnapper organization, but it doesn't look like the note of a terrorist. It's not conforming to that. Yeah, but she wasn't kidnapped. So everything's wrong about it. Yeah? She was murdered most likely in the cellar. She was murdered and abused sexually. Yeah, so we're not looking for a note from anybody who's an organized group. We're looking for, and also what happens is when a piece of such devastating and horrible crime goes on, I think what our minds do is to go, well, the criminal must be brilliant, because how could this ever happen unless you've got an incredible genius doing these crimes? And we don't go, could be an absolute misfit loser who messes up at every other eventuality apart from this one, where actually a crime is committed and maybe they didn't even think they were going to do that because they're a complete mess up and they can't write a decent note. Because it's not a decent note, people go, well, the parents must have done it. No, anybody could have done it. It's a terrible letter. Any idiot could have messed that one up, including, as Patsy's saying here, the person that murdered her daughter. So look, I'm getting as agitated as Steve because it's my belief that the possibilities here are huge. And what you need to look at is, what is the probability? Once you go from all those possibilities, and we'll hear even more possibilities if we go, once we go through all these possibilities, what are the probabilities here? Anyway, Chase, that's my rant on the note. It's a thing of mystery, and we try and make it fit an idea that we have about a perpetrator, but that isn't the perpetrator. But they're not a terrorist or, extremist organization. It's one person.
I think Steve did it.
It's possible. That's
Watch
the
it.
thing.
Don't say that.
It's possible, but it's not probable that he did. It is
Okay,
possible that he did, but it's not probable that he
I have
did.
to say so we don't get sued. No, I don't think Steve did it. I was joking.
Joking. Yeah, it's a joke. So here's a couple of things for me. Mark, I'm with you 100%. I think this guy is a believer. I think he's convinced himself, whether he believed it in the beginning or not, who cares? But now he is delivering a sermon. If you don't believe it, watch him bounce, watch him drive, watch him lean in. That's sermon-like almost. And he gets one of the best displays of Southern womanhood I've ever seen in my life. He pings her, and all three of us are raised by Southern women, so we recognize that body language when you've crossed the line. This is defiant. It's a beautiful thing. Chin up, teeth exposed, shaking her head, eye blocking. She uses this title, Mr. That's Southern woman all day. And then she uses that head batoning and her respiration goes up. She's had enough. And Chase, the reason I think her voice trails off is I'm going to use a Scottism, because he was raised by Southern women too. He's on my last nerve. She trails off at that, is why I think she does it. She's just done with this guy. She's dismissing him. And I have never seen a better display of a Southern woman who is dismissing and defiant than this one. And I think if you pay attention to him, he believes in it because he's still bouncing. He's still going at her. But what he doesn't do is he doesn't call her out and say, you did it, and here's how I know how. He'll say, you're the only person who there was any evidence in handwriting. The handwriting people said this. He borrows authority at every turn, which is why, Mark, I think it is related to his book. He's going to say the evidence is boom, boom. He didn't say you did it. Now here's how I know. He goes and says the evidence doesn't support someone else. Back to your point, Mark. And John Ramsey tries to make the same distinction. Okay, you tried 72 people. There's still 6 billion people on earth you didn't try. And it might be one of those. So I think that's a good one. Then John leans in and starts to baton and point. And he does something we haven't seen a lot on this show. He does a whipping baton. That's making my point better than most others we ever see. That's a hard point. We've met John. He's very contained. Now he's 80. but he was very contained in the other stuff too. He's a very contained guy, very soft-spoken. There's not a lot of whipping. There's not a lot of that in his body language. So that's pretty demonstrative for him, even watching. We have a tendency to, if we start doing that to you, if an old Southern guy's doing that to you, he is probably mocking you at some point. But anyway, then she comes back. Oh, let's see. He goes to, when he makes the handwriting, you change the handwriting thing. He's going at it. He's leaning into it still. You changed your handwriting. Then she drifts off, and then she gets defiant again. And that, I'm with you, Scott, I wholeheartedly concur. Now, Chase, one other thing that could be about that letter, in my opinion, she admits whoever did this killed her daughter. So any assumption that she had anything to do with that letter then is putting it back on her foot and slapping her in the face. I think that's why it's on her last nerve and she just drifts off. And we're going to see her get a whole lot more dismissive as the thing goes. And Scott, I have no idea what you're talking about being a jerk to anybody. I might have done it twice on TV, but other than that, I've never been a jerk.
Oh, I believe you. You never been deceptive or lied or anything.
No, it's not in our DNA.
Wow, did you hear that?
Job description.
Your contention is she wrote the note.
I do.
What do you base that on?
I do. I base that on question document examiners. By the time I left the Boulder Police Department, June of 1998, Patsy, out of 73 suspects whose handwriting had been looked at, you were the only one who showed evidence to suggest authorship.
And why then didn't they go right in and arrest? Why didn't they?
These people know better than anybody. Probable cause was not the issue in this case. Patsy, you could have been arrested in this case.
I wish I had been, and then we would have had a free and fair trial, and you would have met your Waterloo, Mr. Thomas.
Are you saying that you would have through the questions, John?
Question, Steve. While you was assaulted on my wife, because you have assaulted her, you've called her a murderer. You have checked 73 suspects and said because Patsy's handwriting was the only one that couldn't be eliminated, therefore she is a murderer. That is absurd. You would have to check
change your handwriting
billion people.
I did not change my handwriting.
Why would question document experts and people who looked at the ransom note suggest that you changed handwriting habits after the homicide?
We have not heard that. That is not what our experts said.
Can Patsy answer the question, Mr. Rouse?
If you're going to continue to assault her, I will continue to answer the question.
She came on the show tonight. I'm assuming she's capable of answering questions.
She's very capable of answering your questions.
I still haven't heard the theory yet. I totally agree that whoever wrote this ransom note killed our daughter. Yes, I concur wholeheartedly.
He believes you.
Let's hear. What I want to hear is, how is it exactly that you think that I killed my daughter? I just cannot understand that. I want to hear it from start to finish.
Patsy,
Tell me.
I wasn't there. You were at home that night, and apparently you say you can't say for
Mr.
certainty you were in the house, right?
Yes.
Answer
my question, please.
Certainly.
Well, he wasn't there, so he can't know for sure.
He has a theory.
He has to have a theory. All right.
Murder.
Yeah, and
What is
you
your theory?
heard the theory. I
heard the theory.
offered a hypothesis. One.
Please answer my question.
I'm trying to. Well, certainly in a domestic homicide, some evidence that might otherwise be incriminating that could be explained away. I think there are some lacking pieces of the puzzle here that
they hid?
No, that prevented beyond a reasonable doubt in the minds of prosecutors from taking this case forward. But I think there was a toileting issue that night that has been dismissed and underplayed.
Totally explain.
A bedwetting or a toileting issue.
That caused Patsy to get mad at her daughter.
Absolutely.
And say slap her or hit her or...
I don't know. I'm suggesting that there was an explosive encounter because Patsy at one point put the child in clothes, a red turtleneck, for example, not the same clothing she was found in deceased. The following day, I think something happened in that bathroom.
Right. What would lead then to garroting and hitting on the head? What would lead
I
to
don't
that?
know. What can you imagine would lead to garroting or hitting on the head?
What can you imagine? I can't imagine. I want you to look at me and tell me what you think happened.
Patsy, I'll look you right in the eye. I think you're good for this. I think that's what the evidence suggests.
Steve Thomas, yours.
So in other words, she killed her daughter in a rage over the bedwetting and then garroted her.
Yeah, this is interesting hearing this theory because, again, it's not consistent with forensic experts that worked with the police department, law enforcement in this case. Right.
I disagree. Totally disagree. JonBenét, in fact, the autopsy report says this. JonBenét died of strangulation.
Where am I supposed to have learned how to make this garrote?
John calls it a very skilled instrument of some sort. You admit now, do you not, that it was your paintbrush that was used? Do you admit that?
I don't know.
Steve? Well, no, I care. Let her answer the question,
If
John.
the perpetrator was in our home, he had
Your paintbrush.
access. He had access.
The kidnapper who forgot his ransom note, the kidnapper who forgot his pen and all his rules of the instruments.
You know what? This isn't, we're not going to solve this tonight. And I refuse to have a Jerry Springer type exchange with us man. You know, this has subverted justice in this country like nothing in the history of the Constitution of this country. We have had now 2 detectives from the Boulder Police Department. First, Detective Arndt comes on and emphatically, as emphatic as Mr. Thomas is this evening, says that John Ramsey was the murderer. She could see it in his eyes the day that we found JonBenét. Now, Mr. Thomas, as emphatic, but with yet another idea of how this happened, says that Patsy is the murderer.
Well, would you agree, Patsy, that almost none of it makes sense?
It
None
was
of
an
it.
evil.
What was the guy doing? Why did the intruder do this?
Evil
I don't know, but when we find out,
that
God
we
willing, we'll
when we
know.
find this creature.
But this person stalks the streets. I don't mean to be too
Absolutely.
maudlin here, but
Yes,
there's someone
yes.
out there.
Well, somebody better get worried about it because there are children in this country that are just as vulnerable as
You're not.
JonBenét
You got to get a break.
was.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
So here we are again with Steve with more of this whole body illustrating and bouncing as he goes. And then why would you look and ask the mother about a garrote? That's kind of a screwed up thing to do. I mean, at the end of the day, just, and then going to her paintbrush, she's had enough of him. You can't miss it now. A chin up. You can look at her cadence is changing as she starts to talk down to him. Wrinkled brow, confusion. Like, what are you talking about? As he's asking these questions about a garrote and asking her why she would have a theory. I don't get it. And then she batons at every syllable. John's just sitting there shaking his head. No, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. As this guy goes to say it was your paintbrush, look at his brow up like he's asking for approval on that one. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. All this occurred in somebody's house. Of course, their stuff was used. But you thought the guy brought one with him or brought a tool with him? Anyway, she looks at him in disbelief and shakes her head. There's just so much here. And then I see John smiling, and people may think of negative of that. My guess is he's thinking, you don't know what you're signing up for right there, son. That's my guess about what he's thinking, because he knows what's coming, and she's about to go after him. This is just such, of all the people I've ever met, of all the police officers I've ever met, that approach to asking her why somebody would build a garrote is probably one of the most awkward questions I've heard anybody ask. I would have said, look, the evidence is this. Your fingerprints are all over this stuff. You owned it. So I would think he would walk down an evidence train instead of asking some weird question like that. Maybe it's just me. Chase, what do you see?
I would think that evidence would come up sometime. We're not going to see it in this video, but I want to know if any of you mofos use the word toilet as a verb.
I do occasionally.
No.
Toilets at yesterday.
I'll have to toilet.
No, good catch. No.
It's like saying, did you breakfast well? Oof, which somebody said to Scott at a hotel that he was staying. So there's the toileting thing is just bizarre. And maybe that's some parlance in Colorado that I've never heard. But this guy's not making a case for anyone to believe that he's a responsible investigator. Let's talk about the behavior. Why, if you're watching this and you saw this clip just now, why you might be getting a gut feeling about him and you kind of can't put your finger on it. He's making blatant, forward, and pointed accusations instead of suggesting that it's likely or even possible she had more to do with this than she's letting on. He's not responsibly saying that the evidence is pointing in this direction. He's making these bizarre accusations directed at somebody in a very personal way, all while bouncing up and down in his chair. Just weird. But he's also drawing conclusions like There was an explosive event that happened because clothes were changed. That was the thread that was made in this video. So this all seems really aggressive and presumptuous. That this might also be making people feel off because he's released a book about this murder right after he resigned or sometime after that, which again is not in keeping with a person that's also, I'm making money on the investigation and I'm doing the investigation and making money on a book about it. Just unusual. But this bouncing that he's doing is not repetitive. It's used during these key points in his speech, which makes it what's called postural bumping. And this is associated with aggression or dominance. And again, there's an indignant Patsy here, making a denial, but doubling down. I don't think she makes a denial here, but she doubles down on asking him about specific details of the incident instead of her innocence or a perpetrator, which I thought was unusual. But maybe there's more to this. And maybe, Greg, you can throw some color on this. And what I meant was Mark.
Lovely. Yeah, here's what I love about, look, I mean, these two, Patsy and Steve, that's a bad combination. This is not good. This is, and I think, you know, I've said this before about Patsy Ramsey. She is not, in many of her interviews, she's not the easiest person to like. She's not likable to a general public, either because in some cases she's medicated and that looks wrong to people. In some cases, she's very, very forthright in that, as Greg, as you've been saying, in that Southern way. And not everybody on the planet is a Southern woman. And therefore, not everybody on the planet goes, oh, I get it. That's my mum there. That's how people should be in this situation. Dignity and strength, you know, when there's a poverty of stuff around you. You know, dignity and a strength. No, it's not, that's not everybody's life. So she, you know, and at times I do find her quite reasonable and light, but it's not most of the time with her, I would say. But here's something I think she does, which is wonderful. A great illustrator she does here, as she says, yet another idea. And she gives us this illustration of somebody trying to maneuver ideas into fit. Yeah, it's a beautiful illustration that she's doing there of look what this guy is trying to do, just trying to get something to fit. It's so well done. It's so perfectly placed. It's so, let's say, organic in the way it happens that certainly I don't think that's coming from the mind of somebody who is responsible for this death, that she's able to see this world where he's just trying to fit it in. It's just brilliantly done. And then Larry, I don't know what his job's meant to be, but you know, John Ramsey, or it might be Patsy, one or the other of them, says, look, you know, there's a perpetrator out there, there's a murderer out there, and they're out there amongst us, and you know, you've got to, you know, and there's a threat. There are children just as vulnerable, one of them says. There's children just as vulnerable. And Larry goes, well, we got to go to a break now. It's like, hang on, that was a public service announcement. That was a warning. And again, it kind of touches on the political nature of this, that there's a possibility there that the law authorities have not investigated this accurately, correctly, and the best they should. And there is the possibility that there's a perpetrator out there amongst people, and there's a true warning going out there, and it's being shut down at that point. Just very interesting from my point of view to see that happening. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, going back to Larry King, I think that the situation here is it's kind of getting away from him. It's becoming bigger than he is. Then his show is this argument back and forth. So he's trying to get in there and be a part of it, show that he's controlling and driving. Because at this point, he isn't. That fuss is what's driving the whole thing. So I think that's he just looks, it just feels odd to see him doing that and hear the things he's saying. And as quick as he's getting in, all hunched over and climbing in there like that, man, it's weird for Larry King anyway. But when Patsy says, look me right in the eye and tell me what you think I did, he doesn't do it. Won't do it. And what he does is he moves from there onto that garrote issue that he has. And he's really careful with what he's saying. These are. I really think he's thought these out. He's got these little things pre-planned, these little phrases and things he's saying. These are structured sentences he's got because they come up at odd places. He gets near the place where he could throw it in, but he crams it in there and says, now it's about this. And it just doesn't work very well. That's why they keep butting heads like that really hard. And I think that's pretty hardcore chaff and redirect right there, right out in the front of this thing. And then Patsy calls out that this is below the intellectual level of what they would expect to go on there with the people involved. As this guy keeps doing this, it is turned into a Maury Povich show or whatever. It doesn't look good at all for anybody. And then they're talking about how the lead detective said she could tell that John Ramsey was the murderer just by looking in his eye. Anybody that says that's a moron. That's not true. That can't be done. What?
You missed the class about the murderer look? We all had it. Okay.
They didn't teach you the murderer's look, clearly. No, it's the real thing.
I got to update my
twisted. There's a little something here. We can't share that because it's secret code.
I got to update my research train. I got to get back into it anyway because I'm about to get all worked up. Anyway, don't believe it if somebody says that. That's the most unprofessional thing I think I may have ever heard. I looked him in the eye, knew he had done it.
We should do her show. We should do her on the show.
Oh, yeah.
All right, then. I say we did. I say we
Next time. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's, there's nobody has any business saying anything like that. That's so unprofessional. And boy, it sure makes her look bad. And it would make me say, if I was part of that department, I'd go, wait a minute, the DA or something, say, well, maybe we should go check on some of the stuff she did before. This doesn't sound like it. Nobody says that. They do in movies. If it's the person who finds somebody else dead and they're in a haunted house or something and there's a guy with a hatchet running around, that's one thing. I can tell he's the one that did it. That's one thing. It's a movie. But in real life, no, you don't. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I'm going to get worked up. I'm going to hush.
You did the old glasses were cool. Was ya? One?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe go with it.
Yeah, I think I've seen that look in Cape Fear. So it's definitely in Cape Fear. So if it's in Herger, it must be true. The original. It must be a real thing.
Yeah. Well, certainly in a domestic homicide, some evidence that might otherwise be incriminating that could be explained away. I think there are some lacking pieces of the puzzle here that
they hid?
No, that prevented beyond a reasonable doubt in the minds of prosecutors from taking this case forward. But I think there was a toileting issue that night that has been dismissed and underplayed.
Totally explain.
A bedwetting or a toileting issue.
That caused Patsy to get mad at her daughter.
Absolutely.
And say slap her or hit her or...
I don't know. I'm suggesting that there was an explosive encounter because Patsy at one point put the child in clothes, a red turtleneck, for example, not the same clothing she was found in deceased. The following day, I think something happened in that bathroom.
Right. What would lead then to garroting and hitting on the head? What would lead to that?
I don't know. What can you imagine would lead to garroting or hitting on the head?
What can you imagine? I can't imagine. I want you to look at me and tell me what you think happened.
Patsy, I'll look you right in the eye. I think you're good for this. I think that's what the evidence suggests.
Steve Thomas Doors.
So in other words, she killed her daughter in a rage over the bedwetting and then garroted her.
Yeah, this is interesting hearing this theory because, again, it's not consistent with forensic experts that worked with the police department, law enforcement in this case. Right.
I disagree. Totally disagree. JonBenét, in fact, the autopsy report says this. JonBenét died of strangulation.
Where am I supposed to have learned how to make this garrote?
John calls it a very skilled instrument of some sort. You admit now, do you not, that it was your paintbrush that was used? Do you admit that?
I don't know.
Steve,
Well, no, I care. Let her answer the question,
If
John.
the perpetrator was in our home, he had
Your paintbrush.
access. He had
The kidnapper who forgot his ransom note, the kidnapper who forgot his pen and all his jewels of the instruments.
You know what? This isn't. We're not going to solve this tonight, and I refuse to have a Jerry Springer type exchange with us man. You know, this has subverted justice in this country like nothing in the history of the Constitution of this country. We have had now 2 detectives from the Boulder Police Department. First, Detective Arndt comes on and emphatically, as emphatic as Mr. Thomas is this evening, says that John Ramsey was the murderer. She could see it in his eyes the day that we found JonBenét. Now, Mr. Thomas, as emphatic, but with yet another idea of how this happened, says that Patsy is the murderer.
Well, would you agree, Patsy, that almost none of it makes sense?
It
None
was
of
an
it.
evil.
What was the guy doing? Why did the intruder do this?
evil
I don't know. But when we find out,
that
God
we
willing, we'll
when we
know.
find this creature.
But this person stalks the streets. I don't mean to be into
Absolutely.
maudlin here, but
Yes,
there's someone
yes.
out there.
Well, somebody better get worried about it because there are children in this country that are just as vulnerable as JonBenét.
You got to get a
was.
break. Back to no qualms here. You're not out to get them, right?
Absolutely not.
And you don't think he started out to get you, right? He believes his theory. You're not going to eat it.
Believes it, as flawed as it is. Let me ask this question.
Well, how about the convoluted sex crimes theory? I still haven't heard that, John. I had to explain my theory. Let's hear this pedophile kidnapper.
What Steve Thomas's theory is based on
not gonna answer it.
is that our child wet her bed and we slaughtered her. That is so preposterous.
You weren't there, John. You can't.
I was there. I know Patsy. I've
were
lived
there.
with her for 20 years. I know that she loved that child more than anything in the world. I would have given my life for JonBenét. Patsy would have given her life for JonBenét. And I'm sorry we weren't able
Are you saying that if it were Patsy, you would never have covered up?
Absolutely not.
No.
Not
So,
in a New York minute.
so you never doubted
No.
your wife? Never?
No.
Not for a second?
There is sufficient evidence to a trained eye that an intruder came into our home. The forensic evidence supports.
And that came with the idea of what?
I don't know for sure.
Well, kidnapping.
We speculate. The world's one of the world's leading profilers, John Douglas, has said that this killer was angry with me, or he was very jealous of me, and this was an anger or jealousy that was acted out against me.
They'd have taken it out against you. He kills your child.
Sadly,
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, okay, look, just for me in this one, the massive difference between the tension state of retired investigator, Steve here, and John Ramsey. You got this investigator up in passion here, up at this chest area, often sometimes almost coming off his chair, yeah? Just like an excited child. There's almost a naivety. Like you say, Greg, it is somebody in this belief system, completely launching into it, supporting it, whatever, and it's unstable. Ultimately, you've got somebody who looks unstable, who's giving quite an inept commentary of how you might investigate or critically think anything. And John Ramsey, calm, assertive, collected. From my experience of sitting down and meeting him, that's John Ramsey. I mean, now he's older, he's even more subdued, but ultimately that calm and assertive nature is how he is. That's how he's probably, his professional life, the way he conserves his energy is via that calm, assertive nature. So just an incredible juxtaposition. Then at the end, this investigator, or retired investigator, just want you to look at the end of this, how he's left pushing his papers around with his pen, pushing his papers around. Something about the way this interview now is going. It's not following the structure he would like it to follow. He's got his ideas down on there and he's just adapting. I mean, great adapter. many, many little pushes of the papers there. There's no reason. They're in front of you. They don't need to move anywhere. You can still see them. So why are these little micro pushes happening? You're upset by this. You're unstabilized by this situation. Greg, what do you got on this one?
So, Mark, I think when you start to take control of objects on your table and you're in a bind, it's to take control of something because you're losing control somewhere else. That's usually what I find, especially in business meetings. When I'm sitting talking to somebody and I see them starting moving things, I'm like, yep, I'm in your head now. Time for me to work on my magic. So I think that's an important part of it. There's also, John Ramsey does a very polite laugh at him. He doesn't laugh. He smiles and puts his head down. That's a laughing in your face move all day, any day. And like you said, John is a very calm demeanor kind of guy. He was the calmest at the table talking to us, the calmest person in the room, just bum, bum, bum. And really interesting at talking. He does lip licking. A lot of people are going to say that's tongue jut, but we know from John, watching him over and over and over, and even seeing him in person, it's kind of part of his baseline. It's what he does. It's how he is. So we talk about illustrators as being the brain punctuating its thoughts. There's one of the simply best brain punctuating its thoughts I've ever seen here. And Mark, I'll throw it back to you here in just a second to point out how hard you think that would be for most actors. He goes, absolutely not. That is about as graphic an illustration of what he's saying as you could possibly get. He's emphatic with everything. He's emphatic with all of his illustrators, though. He's spot on with every syllable when he hits it. He puts his hands down the table. There's head movement. I mean, there's just so much stuff going on here with him and punctuating everything he's thinking. It's very clear and very solid. And then he pulls out the big gun. He pulls out the big gun to say, what kind of a person killed my daughter? He doesn't just say, I talked to a profiler. He goes to John Douglas. I mean, you don't get much bigger guns than that. If you talk to Navarro probably learned part of what he did from John Douglas. So powerful thing. Mark, what do you think? Actors get that very effectively?
No, you'd have to rehearse that to make that work. It's a natural thing.
So I don't think
for him.
I don't think he rehearsed to make this point there. I don't think so at all.
No, not at all.
All right. We're still seeing no change in facial expression with this ex-detective. It's still that same weird look he's got on his face. It's almost robotic, almost like he's a mannequin. It's really odd. I won't say anything about his haircut. But he's still not listening. He's just attacking. He's not listening. He's just being aggressive. And then John Ramsey slam dunks him when he says that his theory about, look, you're saying our child, what we did was she toileted Chase, and then we slaughtered her because she went to the bathroom. She peed the bed or whatever, and we slaughtered her. I don't think after that you should say, you got me, I'm out, and do the whole thing that they do in Las Vegas with their hands and get up and leave the table, because that right there is, I don't know, man. That's pretty hardcore saying that, and he's right about that. Chase, what do you got?
Right before this, we all took a little toileting break. And this behavior is super odd. And Scott, I'm going to say one thing to you about the way that he explains himself with the lack of facial expressions. That's correct. Tarek.
You're right.
An openness to injury, an openness to being socially wounded at the, maybe the gain of some kind of notoriety. The behavior is still super weird. It feels combative, manipulative, immature, and way more like a coordinated effort or a campaign than a genuine investigation. It feels like a campaign, not an investigation. I don't know the case as deeply as you do that might be watching, but based on what I'm seeing, the patterns are definitely worth looking at. So here's what stands out. Number one is John's reaction. He says, absolutely not. And you can see his elbow do this, right like that. Absolutely not. And right as he said that, this is a sharp movement. It's something that's been nicknamed the elbow joust. It's like a jerky motion that some researchers call pugilistic gestures, because it's kind of like a boxing move or a fight. But this kind of movement often shows up when somebody's holding back anger or frustration. It's like their body is leaking out emotion, even if they're trying to stay composed. and it shows up again. You're going to notice that it pops up later when he talks about someone did this out of anger or jealousy, which might be a sign those topics hit a pretty big nerve. And then we have lip licking. His tongue goes out and licks his lips. And if you've been a subscriber for a while, you've heard us say that this might be deceptive in some cases. But you've heard us say that it might be deceptive because it was associated with a mountain of like 5 to 10 other things that we're looking at. So this is called a hygienic gesture, something people do to self-soothe, to manage stress, how we look to other people. It's subconscious. But this seems to happen in isolation. There's no obvious emotional cue at the moment. The context isn't there. This might be just John unconsciously calming himself down. And this lip-licking movement can also point to nervousness, even the body reacting to some kind of stress by drying out the mouth. A lot of the stuff up here that we have that's supposed to be wet dries out when we get stressed out. Greg, what do you got?
That's it. I'm done.
We're done on that.
Have you guys been reading any of the comments from the panelists? We have some panelists in there. After we've been doing this, 5 years coming up on it?
Mm-hmm.
Some of these people, the ones that have been with us for the whole time from like episode 1, they're calling out all these things we're talking about, man. It's actually, they are educated now. I don't know, go in there and look.
Yeah, catch a premiere. If you've never done it, catch a premiere and go watch, because the chat is filled with panelists and they're calling it out before we talk. They're watching the video and talking about it. And there'll be thousands of people in there talking about exactly what's happening. I agree with you. They are on.
So we get people like Nicola Maxwell, who's been with us.
Nicola, yeah.
Nicola.
I know her. Yeah.
She's been with us from the beginning, catches a lot of that stuff, and we can see her in the premieres as well.
Everyone chases each other?
Imagine like 20 years ago when some of us most of us were at this kind of 20 years ago. Imagine if you'd have had 5 years of watching this show. You didn't know anything 20 years ago. You know what you know, but you don't know what you know now. Like how quickly you'd have escalated. You wouldn't have had to go through all of those, but learn by just horrific mistakes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you'd know what books to get and who to believe and who had valid information and who didn't, and how you could tell that they didn't. That's so important.
But everybody but Scott, you would also know the stare of the killer. We all know it.
Yes, you missed out. You missed out that chapter.
Can't win them all.
Yeah.
Yep.
In those areas, they call it a killer eyeball.
I'm sure we must have put a chapter in Truth and Lies on the stairs. So
it's in my new log.
Even
just not recalling it. Hell, I edited the book.
Book of us. I got the book 4 of us need to write together. The stupidest I ever heard in body language. And it could be stuff like, I saw it in his eyes. He murdered her. You can have a chapter on each of those.
There's stuff. Have you seen that stuff on TikTok where these people are coming on saying stuff? I'm like, I don't know any of them, but it's nobody we know. But there are a couple of them on there, man, that are just crazy about, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to call this person out because they already go, oh, I remember seeing that. Man, there are a couple on there that's just rough, man.
I don't sound too much TikToks.
I think a lot of the TikTok people every time I've seen it, it's underinformed and never in doubt.
Yeah. Sounding further, that's on display. Yeah.
But that's why people like us get a bad name. I mean, it's pseudoscience. What they're doing. I don't know if that's pseudoscience or not.
Jason, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church, and we used to say, if you can't sing good, sing loud. That's what they're doing.
Oof. We used to have this woman that stood behind us and sang like a parrot. You ever hear one of those? Sounds just like a parrot, man. I won't go into it, but man, it's bad. Oh, it's once you get.
That's like no parrot I've ever met.
Well, I can't do high. Since I got my thyroid out, I can't sing out anymore. So I can't do a parrot. But
either.
It's tough in there. You get in them old Baptist churches, man, like in Kentucky. Grew up listening to that. But
Georgia.
Yeah. But anyway, I think it's amazing how much our panelists, if you want to be a panelist, all you have to do is subscribe. That's it. That's what we call a panelist. So if you haven't subscribed,
that if you look at the subscribe button that's down below this video right now, we're making it glow like a rainbow, just so you can know
I
where.
haven't seen that yet, though. Do it. Let's see if it works. I'll watch.
Yeah, you just did.
Now is the time you need to subscribe to the channel. See?
And that supposedly makes it light up.
Yeah, it's right down below me. I'm the bottom left. The subscribe button is scheduled.
I think it's below me. I think it's here, isn't it?
I think you guys need to fight it out.
Yeah, it's down. Yeah, where Mark is.
I think it's there.
Yeah, down there. Yeah.
Like
Right.
and subscribe if I'm pointing to the subscribe button. Right.
And no kidding, join a premiere because you'll get to see all these people in there talking about this stuff. It's insane how much people already know. It's a great opportunity, and you'll meet a lot of people who are interested in the same stuff you're interested in.
Yeah.
I'm just saying Sadie's job really hard for next week.
What Greg is talking about is that we release the video live. All of us are hanging out with you in the chat, and that happens every Thursday at 12:30 Eastern Standard.
Yeah. I told you the time that woman in the grocery store went top right to me, because you got one similar to that, Chase. You got bottom left it. Yeah. That's crazy.
The best one I've ever had is a woman on a plane come up and say, "Are you Greg from the behavior panel?" And I said, "Yeah." And she just turned and walked off.
Gosh. Told y'all about eating chocolate with a mask on. You know that one.
Yeah.
Oof. Oh, there's go ahead.
I had like maybe a 25-something-year-old girl run up to me in the middle of Atlanta airport, and she goes, "You're Chase Hughes." I was like, "I know." I didn't know how she knew me or if she gonna attack me or something.
I pulled up to Starbucks the other day, and this woman looked at me and she goes, "Are you Scott?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I watch your whole show all the time." Phyllis is her name. Hi, Phyllis, if you're watching. So, all right. Anybody else?
Yes. Accurate. Let's get back to it.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, that's good.
Okay, Chase, you get that one.
Back
Why
to no qualms here. You're not out to get them, right?
Absolutely not.
And you don't think he started out to get you, right? He believes his theory. You're not going to
Believes it, as flawed as it is. Let me ask this question.
Well, how about the convoluted sex crimes theory? I still haven't heard that, John. I had to explain my theory. Let's hear this pedophile kidnapper.
What Steve Thomas's theory is based
I'm
on
not going to answer it.
is that our child wet her bed and we slaughtered her. That is so preposterous.
You weren't there, John. You can't.
I was there. I know Patsy. I've
were
lived
there.
with her for 20 years. I know that she loved that child more than anything in the world. I would have given my life for JonBenét. Patsy would have given her life for JonBenét. And I'm sorry we weren't able
Why are
to.
you saying that if it were Patsy, you would never have covered up?
Absolutely not.
No.
Not
So,
in a New York minute.
so you never doubted
No.
your wife? Never?
No.
Not for a second?
There is sufficient evidence to a trained eye that an intruder came into our home. The forensic evidence supports.
And that came with the idea of what?
I don't know for sure.
Well, kidnapping.
We speculate. The world's one of the world's leading profilers, John Douglas, has said that this killer was angry with me, or he was very jealous of me, and this was an anger or jealousy that was acted out against me.
Instead of taking it out against you, he kills your child.
Sadly,
You did it, Patsy. You hurt yourself when you hired a lawyer.
let's explain how that happened. We were crushed. We were devastated. We had lost our child. Our youngest child was murdered in our home. Friends surrounded us. They did things for us. They made decisions for us. That included bringing in lawyers and acting in what they thought was our best interest. We did not make decisions in those.
In retrospect, was that a mistake?
No, not when I saw Linda Arndt go on national television, who was one of the detectives, and say, "I saw it in John Ramsey's eyes on December 26th. He was the killer." And now we have her counterpart and colleague saying that Patsy's the killer. This was in early in the
cops when they're not there helping. You know, on one hand, they're screaming for the murder to be solved.
4 hours a day.
You haven't answered this question. How, to this day, as we sit here tonight, how much time in the last 4 years have you spent in the Boulder Police Department with the detectives working this case?
I don't know, but I'll tell you that
It's
much.
zero.
I have invited them.
to the Boulder, you used to answer the question,
She has to fix.
So many overtures have been made to them, including one on the table right now, for us to come and talk with them and bring our detectives and our investigators and share information and work together, put pride and prejudice aside, Mr.
You're making that over to them now.
and work to find the killer of this
Are you
child.
making a commitment to go into the Boulder Police Department next week or next month and sit down for an unlimited amount of time to
Cooperation
cooperate?
is a two-way
All right, but
street.
why he's got a fair offer? Why not go to? He's not there. Why not go to the police department?
Here's what we've laid on the table. We have told Chief Beckner that we need them to help find this killer. They have absolute authority over this case, and that's not going to change. We've had investigators, seasoned investigators, collectively with over 500 homicides under their belt, who have been working on this case day in and day out. They have questions. They have information.
Why don't you all get together?
We would love to.
So why don't you do it? Why not go there next week?
If we can go there tomorrow with our investigators, sit down with their detectives, get all questions answered, we'll be there
Well,
tomorrow.
will they not do this?
Absolutely. Glad to hear.
It's on the table. You would go to Boulder tomorrow with your private investigators, meet with all their detectives, and sit down for as long as it takes.
Sit around
to
the
get through
table
this.
and let's get all the questions.
We've got questions. We've got questions.
Boulder should say to this tomorrow morning, come aboard.
Well, it depends because I hear a hidden caveat here that it.
What's the caveat?
That
This is
if you're offering, I'm not there anymore, John. The citizen that's concerned that you want to go into the police department and answer a police question.
All right, Chase, what do you got?
This guy's definitely on a mission, not an investigation. It's what it appears to be to me. And there's only one key part here that I thought was interesting, partly because I didn't get a chance to watch this. I was driving home, also like back-to-back meetings today, and I listened to it on my phone on Apple CarPlay. So here's what I thought was interesting. So Patsy uses this term, this child, to talk about JonBenét. And it's only one data point, but it's in an unusual place here. It happens right when she's saying, work together, put pride and prejudice off to the side, and work to find the killer of this child. I'm paraphrasing. But here's why this might matter. And I think it might. So calling JonBenét this child instead of using her name or something more personal like my daughter or JonBenét or our daughter, it feels a little off, especially in such an emotional situation. And most parents talking about their own kid, especially in the context of something as just purely heartbreaking as this, would usually use a name or something that shows some close connection. So let's talk about a few reasons why this might happen. Number one is emotional distance. So Patsy might have been unconsciously trying to put some space between herself and the reality of what happened. This can happen when somebody's overwhelmed by trauma or guilt, and it's easier to use less personal language. So if in your head you're thinking, wait, you said this about somebody who was guilty a few weeks ago because they distanced the name. If they distanced the name along with like 612 other indicators of weirdness and guilt. So the second reason is trying to sound formal. She might have been trying to choose her words carefully to come across a certain way. And I think maybe it's an appeal to the public or to make her plea sound more objective. So sometimes people do this when they're more focused on what others think than just speaking from the heart. So it makes it sound a little bit more objective. And if it is a possible red flag, it's not proof of anything. Studies show that when people avoid personal terms in situations like this, it can sometimes hint at internal conflict or deception, but it's not associated with the other signs. It's one small detail. So it's really not enough to draw any big conclusions on its own, but it does stand out, especially since it happens right in the middle of her plea for everyone to put pride and prejudice aside and all this. And it makes me wonder what might have been going through her mind when she's saying all of this. And I think it was probably anger. And with the anger, I want to bring other people in with this anger. So it was an appeal to make this sound more objective and acceptable by other people. Super long explanation for one small thing, but I hope it gives you some depth. If you're able to use this in your life, I hope it gives you some depth of understanding of what that means when people do that. Scott, what do you got?
That was long, Chase. That was uncalled for. That was almost 2 minutes. That wasn't really long, dude. I mean, it felt long, but it wasn't long at all.
Not long at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my turn. So I think John does a great job on this, calming things down. Things are getting heated, and he does the classics. And I know I don't want to step on you, Mark, because you're going to go, this is your bag. This is your wheelhouse here. This cat steps in, man. He starts doing his little regulator, gets his hand down, lowers himself, comes a little forward, gets quiet. He doesn't blink much. He blinks 2 times in 40 seconds. That's an average of 3 times a minute. That's not a lot. But he's looking at Larry while he's doing this. Larry coming off that jag of just wanting to be a part of it, no matter what. So I think he maybe tried to calm him down as well. So, and again, let's compare this ex-detective with John and Patsy. He's still not got any much going on as far as expressions go. It's the same thing over and over. That thing with his mouth, his eyes are either doing this or they're coming down like that. He's got the eyebrows up or the eyebrows down. That's about it. Everything else is blank. And he's cutting loose. Again, I want to stress these prepared lines and phrases and little structured things he's saying to get in there. And like you're saying, Chase, it's more of a campaign against them than anything else. And then you look at the Ramseys. Man, they're fluid. They're moving around. They're angry. Their voice tone, volume, everything's going up and down and all around. And they're animated as they're doing this. They're loping along in their anger. They're just cutting right along in there. So that tells me they're feeling real emotion. And then this ex-detective he's just cutting loose with what he had planned. He probably has a list somewhere. I'm going to cover all these things and do all that. And then he tries to frame it so he's the hero of this and say, I'm going to, like he's the connection mechanism for getting them to the police department. Where he says, so you would agree in the next week or the next month to come in to, come on, man. They've already said 40 times, listen, we want to come over there. We've got our people we've been dealing with, our detectives and things. Let's get together and match those up. Let's get them talking, see if we can get this figured out. But he comes in like, so you'll be willing to do this. That kind of stuff makes me sick. So at the end, I think he's just trying to rile them up. I think he's trying to get them all riled up. And then John's got it figured out. And so he just keeps mellowing things out for him. So, but I think he's riling them up so he can get attention for his book. So the more he messes things up and gets people talking about it, because this is before the internet was huge. Before you could go online and watch all this stuff, you had to have people talking about it. That's my impression of it. I could be wrong. That's what I think. And only what I think. I'm surmising at that point. All right, Greg, what do you got?
So it makes me think of an Aykroyd skit here. Ex-police. Remember they had badges?
Oh, yeah.
And they never had any facts. They had, hey, we heard this because they didn't have investigative capability. There's a lot of that in this guy's story to me. It just feels so awkward because he has nothing to be able to point to and say, here's the problem, here's the problem, here's the problem. Look, if you're going to call somebody out and accuse them of something, at least tell them why you know and what grounds you stand on, not allude to some study. And there's a whole lot of that in here. And you can see they have no trust whatsoever in this guy. They have no trust whatsoever in the Boulder Police Department. It's very clear that's why they went to their own resources and hired an army of detectives to try to solve a problem. I deal with business every day. I go and help buy businesses all the time. And that doesn't mean hostile takeover. That means write a check to somebody for a business. And a lot of times the two parties at the table will be talking past each other. That's what this is like. When you lose trust and you're talking past each other, you get to a problem where you really can't do anything. So let's talk for a couple of, just from a logic point of view. Why would you call the attorneys? Well, quite frankly, if you've ever lost anybody in your life, you know that vacuum that creates. Now, compound that when that person's murdered and compound that when it's your child. Think about all of that and how much of that person's psyche is disrupted and catapulted out onto the lawn that day. The brain is not working like it should. If they have dear and trusted friends, and he had people who are coworkers and that, sure, you're going to say, okay, I should what? I should get a lawyer? Well, every one of you knows, I'd call it Hartley Rule 1. If you get accused of a crime, get a lawyer. If you didn't do it, especially if you didn't do it, get a lawyer, because the system works. You hear 3 of us, 4 have interrogated. All 4 of us are talking about systems and things and read and all that. Next thing you know, you're painted into a corner for something you didn't do because you're in trauma and not thinking clearly. So I think it's good advice to get an attorney in this case. I think somebody was looking out for them. Now, they've poured all this in. If you want to know, Scott, you talk about Ray all the time. Emphatic movement, body language. You want to see emphatic movement, watch these two in this video. She's bigger than she's been in anything else in the entire video. She's emphatic. She's got a clear lack of trust. She's going on and on with these big, massive illustrators. And Chase, I think it may be a word pattern. The reason it says this child. It may be a word pattern from this part of the country where I sit, because I've heard people say this child, that child, even when talking about their own kids. So yeah, I'm with you 100%. And the good thing is what I love about you pointing out, it's a lack of emotional connection, but it is a standalone. And we always say cluster, cluster, cluster. There's no clusters, no pile. This is ugly. And then he gets his own version of emphatic and he goes, would love to. But what he is really good at is containing this guy. And then finally, if you watch this detective, this is the first time I see real anger. Watch his mouth narrow as he gets to that point at the end. I think he realizes he just had his fingers closing the door or something a little bit more painful. And John and Patsy both just handed it to him. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, look, here's my take on this, is that there's somebody in this episode now, in being interviewed, who is being insincere and disingenuous, I would say. This particular person, I'll name them, it's Steve. Steve says, I'm a citizen that's concerned you won't go to the police station. I'm a citizen that's concerned you won't go to the police station. So as a concerned citizen, he's just there doing his public service that he's there on there. So why doesn't Larry King have all the concerned citizens of America just show up to an episode, one at a time? Does Larry King go, we need concerned citizens on the show. Let's get some in. No, you don't get on the Larry King show because you're a concerned citizen. There are many of those out there and you're never going to get invited to the show. There's always some other reason that you're on the Larry King show. And he's not at the moment saying why he's on the Larry King show. To your point, Scott, I don't doubt there is probably a book involved. And listen, I got we've all got books. We all need to sell our books as much as we can. They're really hard to write. They don't make anybody huge amounts of money unless you write Harry Potter. So get out there, buy our books. Absolutely. I will plug our books on our show, but there you are on the Larry King show. If you're there to plug your book, say, look, I've written this book about it. All the evidence is in there, but he's being disingenuous here and so passionate now that he's at one point, he does come off his seat there. So he's really not pinned down here. And I've got to think, what's his real stake in this argument? Because he's performing at such a high level. And that's the problem for me. This is now why this interview is so annoying, because Larry King does not turn to him and go, Steve, what's going on? What's your real dog in this fight? What's this really about? Well, I understand there's a girl murdered. Horrible. I understand that. But then you retired, you left that. Like, what happened with you? Like, he's now the most interesting thing on this screen, because I just want to know, what happened? Why did you leave? You gave up. There's a child murdered, and you give up the investigation and carry it on the Larry King show. What's going on in your head, man? What's going on right now? So Steve has become fascinating for me as to what on earth he's doing there and why he's behaving in this way. There's something very disingenuous going on. That's all I got on that one.
I agree with you. Let me give it to you, Chase. That's like 3 in a row for you, man.
Yeah.
Mark, what is that thing right there to your left where your pocket thing is? Is it a plant next to the lamp?
Yeah, we got a Christmas plant for where this normally is, which is an orchid.
Oh,
and so I bought the orchid up here. The upstairs office at the moment is just full of plants that have had to come in from the outside, so they don't die. But this has been replaced by apply.
You did it, Patsy. You hurt yourself when you hired a lawyer. You went.
Let's explain how that happened. We were crushed. We were devastated. We had lost our child. Our youngest child was murdered in our home. Friends surrounded us. They did things for us. They made decisions for us. That included bringing in lawyers and acting in what they thought was our best interest. We did not make decisions in those.
In retrospect, was that a mistake?
No, not when I saw Linda Arndt go on national television, who was one of the detectives, and say, I saw it in John Ramsey's eyes on December 26th. He was the killer. And now we have her counterpart and colleague saying that Patsy's the killer. This was early in the
Cops when they're not there helping. You know, on one hand, they're screaming for the murder to be solved.
4 hours a day.
To haven't answered this question, how to this day, as we sit here tonight, how much time in the last 4 years have you spent in the Boulder Police Department with the detectives working this case?
I don't know, but I'll tell you that much.
zero.
I have invited them.
to the Boulder, used to answer the question. Yes,
So many overtures have been made to them, including one on the table right now, for us to come and talk with them and bring our detectives and our investigators and share information and work together, put pride and prejudice aside, Mr.
You're making that over to them now.
and work to find the killer of this
Are you
child.
making a commitment to go into the Boulder Police Department next week or next month and sit down for an unlimited amount of
Cooperation
time
is
to
a
cooperate?
two-way
All right, but
street.
well, he's got a fair offer. Why not go to? He's not there. Why not go to the police department?
Here's what we've laid on the table. We have told Chief Beckner that we need them to help find this killer. They have absolute authority over this case, and that's not going to change. We've had investigators, seasoned investigators, collectively with over 500 homicides under their belt, who have been working on this case day in and day out. They have questions. They have information.
Why don't you all get together?
We would love to.
So why don't you do us this? Why not go there next week?
If we can go there tomorrow with our investigators, sit down with their detectives, get all questions answered, we'll be there
Well,
too.
will they not do this?
Absolutely. Glad to hear.
It's on the table. You would go to Boulder tomorrow with your private investigators, meet with all their detectives, and sit down for as long as it takes
Sit around
to
the
get through
table
this.
and let's get all the questions.
We've got questions. We've got questions.
Boulder should say to this tomorrow morning, come aboard.
Well, it depends because I hear a hidden caveat here that it.
What's the caveat?
That
This is
if you're offering, I'm not there anymore, John. The citizen is concerned that you won't go into the police department and answer a police question. It's the question. You have said you want federal law enforcement brought into crimes where a child has been killed. But in this case, you don't want them brought in because they're part of this great, vast
I would
conspiracy.
have been, the biggest mistake I made
Now.
excuse me, Steve.
Now,
The
Joe.
biggest mistake I made when this happened was that I didn't call the FBI directly. I called the Boulder police.
They were there that
That was a horrible mistake.
The F-
They were not leading the investigation. Linda Arndt was leading the investigation.
You should call the FBI.
I
Right?
called
The FBI was there and advising from day one, John.
I never saw them. They were never.
When they were at your house.
I wanted them, if they had been called to lead the investigation, that would have been a much better system.
Sister Ramsey, they were at your house.
They were not in our house.
Patsy,
Yes, they were, Patsy.
You weren't
didn't
there.
do this.
You were not
Patsy,
there.
if you didn't do this, you're out of your mind. You must be going out of your mind no matter what.
I'm not going out of my
No,
mind
I mean-
no matter what.
Well, I mean by out of your mind, if you did it, this was terrible. You didn't do it, you're being accused of doing it. And your daughter is dead. That would drive me nuts. So I don't know how you get through a day.
I have a faith that comes from only one source. God knows who killed JonBenét Ramsey. Steve Thomas does not know, Patsy Ramsey does not know, and John Ramsey does not know. God knows, and the truth is going to prevail. This is not
You have complete faith in that.
absolutely. We, with the help of the police authorities, this case can be
It'll leap forward here if they all sit down. You
Absolutely. But the Bible also says without confession, there is no forgiveness. Patsy, do you
No, it
think
doesn't say that.
it doesn't?
Christ did not ask
Without
for repentance
confession,
when he forgave.
there is no
his disputers.
forgiveness. Do you think that God will forgive the person who did this?
That's up to that person and God.
Do you support the death penalty for the person who is ultimately
I
convicted
do
of
not
this crime?
support the death penalty because of the horrible flaws I've seen in our justice system. There are many, many innocent people on death row today. That's because of people like Steve Thomas.
Patsy?
I concur.
Do you support the death penalty in this case? Whoever killed your daughter?
No, because they would say, what if it's the wrong guy that's convicted?
We need
find out.
we need a DNA database, you know, as one of the things that we're purporting, because if we have unexplained DNA, if we knew whose DNA that
There
was,
is DNA there.
then we would know who killed JonBenét.
Nobody at this table is a DNA expert, and the DNA experts in this case, at the time I left, had told us this is not a DNA case because of issues, degradation, contamination.
By DNA that was found under her fingernails and on her underwear.
Could have been there from 5 days ago. Right?
Oh,
There are other sources other than the killer.
why would
for
it be under
DNA
her fingernails
report.
and her underwear?
If there are other sources, then tell me who it is. But until we know who it is,
If-
I'm hopeful
if-
that DNA belongs to the killer.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Just I realized, yep, I got it. Wow. Dude.
Could be a record.
It's funny. It probably is a record. Well, we needed some entertainment. It's funny because I turned it off because music started and wasn't paying attention. I was like, dang it.
Wow. We'll have to get an official timing on that, but I've got to think it might be one of the longest ever.
I did.
It has to go a ways to beat my last long one. When I do it well.
Yeah.
Wow. That was
So
awesome.
if you can go back in the annals of history and
Easy.
work out whether that was the longest ever. Great.
I think it was.
Sadie will know. Sadie will put it down. And guys down below, tell me if I was selling it at least.
Man.
You were selling it. So you now want to know what you were talking about. Some pretty sad because there's some. Now I'm going to do it stoically and just talk. Just right. Because I already agree.
Yeah. Like I've got nothing like that in my notes.
Me either, man. I didn't know something was wrong with you or what.
Yeah.
Well, they need
Right. What is it?
Maybe I had a stroke. Okay, I'll go to my notes. I'll keep them short this time.
Yeah.
So John goes to his telling baseline and starts to doing downward tonation at the end of every sentence. You could probably go back and tell what I'm saying based on this. And he's emphatic with his head batoning when he's doing it. So he's saying, look, bump, bump, bump. He's telling exactly how things go. When Patsy hears Linda Arndt, she rolls her eyes. You got to love that. That's dismissal. If he can't tell by that, you've lost them to the point that whatever you say from your own is a waste of time, then he's in trouble. Mark, I talk about, and it's funny because you responded when I said this. I talk about somebody tilting their head. If you go back and watch the video, Mark responds when I tilt my head. That's data intake, but that's pub fight data intake. What would you say? And she's ready for it. And she's ready to go after him. And Scott, I'm back to, you're on my last nerve move by her. Then she goes back to emphatic with a whole body batoning, everything moving. And this guy, not realizing he's lost them entirely, tries the punishment question. And a really poor, heavy-handed version of it. Do you think the person ought to get the death penalty? Well, what we usually say is a punishment question is what do you think should happen to the person? Not do you think you should get a death penalty? Because you've stumbled into now political, social, all kinds of things when you say death penalty instead of just asking that. So it just shows he attended all the classes except the right ones. Scott, he didn't get the look in your eye class either. He got the read method from somewhere else. Maybe went
took
through
one
school.
day.
Maybe he went to read, maybe he did. But I think he missed the key point thereafter, and that's progressive admission of guilt and then a close. None of that. Let's just go and ask, what about the death penalty? Big mistake. Scott, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. I think he took day one. That was it. He didn't go all the way through. Didn't get finished.
Cliff notes.
All right.
Cliff note.
Let's notice how masterfully John shuts this guy down when he gets into that little fuss thing happening there. He takes control of that conversation. I thought that was, I'm gonna leave that to Mark, but I thought that was brilliant the way he did that. Man, because he starts talking loud and looking at Larry King and all that, and then he gets real quiet. And then he starts in again with that getting low and doing all that. Masterful. That was great. Then when Patsy finishes up, she says, God knows who did this. And then the ex-detective says, because he smarts off, and he says, what about when the Bible says,
Oh, yeah.
the Bible, where is it in here? What is it? Oh, yeah.
Confess.
Without confession,
Yeah,
there's
I
no
think,
forgiveness.
yeah, he says, I think the Bible says, there's no forgiveness without
There's no
confession.
forgiveness. Yeah.
Right. And then John straightens him out on that. I thought that was awesome. Thought how he did that was awesome, because it really, I think it set the tone for the ending as this thing starts winding down. I think that's like the backhand this guy needed, coming off like he's all knowledgeable about that and everything. And then even at the end of this, the fussing and fighting the stuff, I think the Ramseys come off looking professional. I think they come off looking like they've got, I always say whoever uses the term class has none, but I got to say it. They look like they got class. Yeah, and they still look like they've got it together in this. So I thought they looked professional, in other words. So whereas this guy comes off looking like Maury Povich or something, or somebody who's on that show, not a contestant, a guest on his show, that type of thing. So I think they really came out looking as good as you can in a situation like this for this one. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I agree. Wholeheartedly agree with y'all. One thing I've noticed with both of them, Patsy and John, even from their very first interviews, is that they don't give each other those little confirmation glances when they talk about opinions and details. And that's pretty unusual. Most people naturally check in with each other, maybe subtly, to make sure they're on the same page. And then Larry King asks, you have complete faith in that? So Patsy responds by dropping her head down, closing her eyes. It's like she's shutting herself off. To me, this looks like denial, that maybe she's lacking faith. Nothing necessarily about what she's saying, but maybe about whether she really believes the case is going to be solved. And then there's I'm just going to call him detective guy here. He is practically bouncing in his chair and even throws out this fake Bible quote. And what's funny is how fast, Scott, to your point, John just shuts him down. And you can literally hear Steve backtrack and go soft voice to saying, oh, does it? You can hear it. And you can even catch 5 elbow jousts in a row after that look like this. If you're listening to this while you're cooking or in your car, it's when your elbow shoots outward from your body. So after that, John starts fiddling with stuff on the desk, regaining control, just like what we saw earlier, moving things around, adjusting them. I think it's a big one to pay attention to in your life. Adjusting our environment like that is often a way that we feel like we've got more control on the moment. We need to gain more control. And it's when we're feeling unsettled or overwhelmed. And by the way, this behavior is part of what's called the behavioral table of elements. It's on the behavioral table of elements. The brand new version for 2025 just got released yesterday with 81 new pieces of research. And if you didn't know, every cell on the behavioral table is backed by 4 independent pieces of research in order to kind of make it onto the behavior table. So as a quick tip, watch for people adjusting objects around them meaninglessly, like pens, papers, clothes, when they're in a stressful situation. It's a subconscious way of trying to take back control when we feel like things are slipping out of our hands. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, if you're a subscriber, go and get that behavioral table of elements from Chase. I use it all the time.
Below. We got a link.
Yeah.
It'll be in the PDF.
Put it-
It'll be the
put it in the
PDF
PDF.
we'll give you.
Yeah. Because it's an incredible piece of work, a way of imagining nonverbals in a way that nobody else had done that before. So I use it all the time, Chase. It's fantastic. Fantastic.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Go grab that. Listen, concur with everything that's said there. Throwing out that Bible quote, getting taken to task on that immediately. I mean, it's just inept. It's the ineptitude of it is staggering. Don't come to a fight with the Bible if you don't know that somebody else is going to be able to quote it better than you, especially if you're just making stuff up. Yeah. So super inept. And Chase, to your point, I don't think I've ever seen so many little elbow barges in one little space of time there. It's quite astonishing. So, when we replay that clip, really watch out for that moment, because that I've never seen at that level before. Just says to me, look, this is a totally antagonistic relationship. No good is going to come of that relationship. There's nothing beneficial about it at all. Now, and let's finish off here with Larry King, who really comes in with something at the end, which is indicative of, I think, the problem that this investigation and people, I guess, unpacking this whole mystery and horror, it's indicative of this, because they start talking about the DNA underneath the fingers and in the underwear, and Larry says, could have been from 5 days ago. Yeah, it could, Larry. Yeah, it could. Could have been from 10 years ago. Could be alien DNA, Larry. I mean, it could be anything, but what's it probably? You got to make a distinction between what is possible and what is probable. Okay, that's the big thing. And Larry King, as the amateur investigator that he is, goes, well, could be 5 days old. Yeah, could be, or 6 or 7, or a few hours. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Who knows? Who knows? And ultimately, you've got an investigator who's doing the same, coming up with possibilities and then selling them as probabilities based on, but I've got an expert, and borrowing authority from other people to substantiate his possibilities that he's become wedded to and believes, and Scott, to your point, are probably now in print in a book. And so he probably would benefit from a reinstigation of everybody going, yes, it's them, because it makes his book more credible. Greg, you got a thought on this? Please.
No, he does have a book. As a matter of fact, if you watch this entire interview, he says, I stand by my book. It's funny because I should have put it in there when they say, you stand by. I said, I stand by my book. And that's what my book says. So, yeah, I mean, it's...
Right. Well, and as Patsy says, sounds to me like a book that's trying to get a lot of possibilities and plant them as probabilities or even fact in your mind.
It says in that book.
Sets you free. You see what you're doing? It was even too subtle for me. It was even too. I wanted a bold pitching of the book, and you were subtly.
So let's just get into art.
Subtly doing it.
We're in it for the art.
Yeah, we are. We're not trying to sell anything here.
Said, bro, Mark, listen to me. We're not trying to sell anything on here.
Right.
For sure. The hell. Hey, let me ask you guys something. One at a time, let's do this. Hang on, get something back in your cup. Let's take a drink because I have a theory.
Okay.
I'll go first. Mark, you take a drink?
Yeah.
There ain't nothing in there, man. Put something in there. I know a fake drink when I see one.
Hang on. All right, hang on.
Okay, I believe you. Don't do it. I believe you. You don't have to do it. Okay. Well, I don't think you drank any. And I'll tell you why.
There for a month.
And I'll tell you why. Chase, take a drink. Okay. Greg, you got anything or not? There's nothing. Yours is empty too. I saw it too.
Swallow.
When somebody drinks something, And I watched it when we did this. Everybody was drinking stuff on here. Our eyebrows go up when we're drinking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I wonder if that's universal, except when you're put on the spot like that. Maybe that doesn't work. Because when I did it, mine go up.
I just swallowed water in it. If they didn't,
You know what? It's probably because when I'm drinking, I'm trying to
You're
sell
looking?
mugs, and it's like I'm going, want a mug? Want a mug?
same thing. I'm looking to it.
Anyway, so if we go back through this, panelists, when we're drinking something, watch our eyebrows. I think all of us make them go up when they go up when we do that.
Good
So
check.
look into that. Maybe I'll do a study on it.
It's the question. You have said you want federal law enforcement brought into crimes where a child has been killed. But in this case, you don't want them brought in because they're part of this great, vast
I would
conspiracy.
have been, the biggest mistake I made
Now.
excuse me, Steve.
Now,
The
Joe.
biggest mistake I made when this happened was that I didn't call the FBI directly. I called the Boulder police.
They were there that
That was a horrible mistake.
The F-
They were not leading the investigation. Linda Art was leading the investigation.
You should call the FBI.
I
Right?
called the
The
FBI.
FBI was there and advising from day one, John.
I never saw them. They were never.
When they were at your house.
I wanted them, if they had been called to lead the investigation, that would have been a much better system.
Mr. Ramsey, they were at your house.
They were not in our house.
Patsy,
Yes, they were, Patsy.
You weren't
didn't
there.
do this.
You were not
Patsy,
there.
if you didn't do this, you're out of your mind. You must be going out of your mind no matter what.
I'm not going out of my
No,
mind
I mean-
no matter what.
Well, I mean by out of your mind, if you did it, it was terrible. You didn't do it, you're being accused of doing it. And your daughter is dead. That would drive me nuts. So I don't know how you get through a day.
I have a faith that comes from only one source. God knows who killed JonBenét Ramsey. Steve Thomas does not know, Patsy Ramsey does not know, and John Ramsey does not know. God knows, and the truth is going to prevail. This is not
You have complete faith in that.
absolutely. We, with the help of the police authorities, this case can be
It'll leap forward here if they all sit down. You
Absolutely. But the Bible also says without confession, there is no forgiveness. Patsy, do you
No, it
think
doesn't say that.
it doesn't?
Christ did not ask
Without
for repentance
confession,
when he forgave.
there
his
is no
disputants.
forgiveness. Do you think that God will forgive the person who did this?
That's up to that person and God.
Do you support the death penalty for the person who is ultimately
I
convicted
do
of
not
this crime?
support the death penalty because of the horrible flaws I've seen in our justice system. There are many, many innocent people on death row today. That's because of people like Steve Thomas.
Patsy,
I concur.
do you support the death penalty in this case, whoever killed your daughter?
No, because they would say, what if it's the wrong guy that's convicted?
We need
find out
we need a
just-
DNA database, as one of the things that we're purporting, because if we have unexplained DNA, if we knew whose DNA that
There
was,
is DNA there.
then we would know who killed JonBenét.
Nobody at this table is a DNA expert, and the DNA experts in this case at the time I left had told us this is not a DNA case because of issues degradation, contamination.
By DNA that was found under her fingernails and on her underwear.
Could have been there from 5 days ago. Right?
Oh,
There are other sources other than the killer.
why would
for
it be under
DNA
her fingernails
or
and her underwear?
If there are other sources, then tell me who it is. But until we know who it is,
If-
I'm hopeful
if-
that DNA belongs to the killer.
In every fight, there's a winner and a loser. So what did you think, Mark?
Yeah. Look, there is a winner here, and it's Steve who wins, the most annoying person in my mind that we've ever had on this show. Annoying for so many reasons, but mainly just the ineptitude in which he's going about his ideas. Well, people keep reminding me in the comments to say it beggars belief rather than it begs belief. But ultimately, these days, you can say both because either is now common parlance. So it both begs and beggars belief at his ineptitude. Chase, what do you think?
I agree. It was aggressive. It wasn't professional. It wasn't the behavior of an investigator. It was the behavior of somebody with a campaign. And if we're going off points like a fight, then it would be the Ramseys. And TKO would be the Ramseys would win. And this is definitely, it was almost embarrassing to watch And I don't know why. There's a weird feeling that I don't think I can even put my finger on. Something about his behavior seemed contrived and needy. Like there was a dependency on the outcome of that interview. Maybe it was to sell books. I don't know.
Greg, you don't win an interrogation. You don't. An interrogation is about extracting information. It may be a confession style interrogation is a little bit different, but either of those places you don't go, you did it, 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 you did it. That's what I heard. You did it. I didn't hear, hey, explain this, explain that, explain this, explain that. The real truth of this is what he did, at least in my experience or my belief in how I feel after the end of this, is make me believe them even more than I ever did. Because they were defiant. They were standing up for what they said was true. They were very aggressive. They offered solutions, but I didn't hear any solutions coming from this side. So I think Ramsey's hands down. This might even be a real knockout, not even a TKO chase in this case, because this guy, I doubt ever had the chance to stand up to them again. Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I think this is a great example of keeping your cool under fire, under great duress, because this guy was coming on so strong. He came out swinging. I mean, just for the fences, trying to hit him right in the face every time. And they did great blocking. You know, a lot of good footwork there. But they really didn't need to do a whole lot because they had the facts. They had what they believed to be the truth, you know, and they believed it. And quite often, when you get a situation like that where it's one against the other, whether it's a fight or an argument or a literal fight, it's who thinks they're right. That's the person that wins most of the time. And from what I've seen in my experience. So I think I agree with you guys, man. I think it was a knockout for the Ramseys on this guy, on the ex-detective. I think they did a great job. And I think John Ramsey showed unbelievable control of a really bad situation. Somebody coming at him being so aggressive like that. Great communicator, that guy. Thank you. All right, fellas. Excuse me. Think that's another good one, and we'll see you next time.